Hi, it's Dr. Noel Williams, Optimal Health Associates, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, February 16th, 2021. COVID update. Some bookkeeping things for the practice, though, if you're part of the practice. We were closed the last 2 days other than some telemedicine appointments. We're going to be open tomorrow no matter what, even though it's snowing. I'm going to add clinic time Thursday afternoon, Friday, and Monday. I had those blocked, and I was going to take a couple days off, but I'm going to work since I've kind of had half time for 2 days. So if you need an appointment, please feel free to call. Other bookkeeping stuff is we've tried to get everyone's refills done and that kind of thing, but it may take a day or two to get caught up. Sorry about that, but it's just the nature of crazy weather.
Also, supplements, if you bought any online, our staff hasn't been in the clinic,
Yeah.
so they'll be a couple of days behind.
And then supplements will be going out in the next day or two. And just remember, flexibility is always appreciated. We're just humans too, like everybody else, and the weather affects us too with these rolling power outages and all that stuff. So that's just the practice update. Now, in terms of, I am going to put a separate post on either tonight or tomorrow at the latest about oxytocin, which is a hormone that can be used both for calming, sleep, sexual function, sexual interest, but it also has some really amazing uses for autism and autistic children. Not that I do that much with that, but I do occasionally treat people with oxytocin with autism if I can't get their pediatricians to. There's really an expert on this at the University of Illinois in Chicago. I've talked about him. He's a pediatric neurosurgeon, Dr. Thomas Loeb, who has written a lot and talked about a lot about that. So anyway, I'm going to do a little separate written post on that. So let's go to COVID. So the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is sitting safely at the FDA without them doing anything for another 10 days. There's been some media bubbles or blips about AstraZeneca should be approved here because it does a really good job. I just have not seen the data that shows that, so I think it's not true. So I, again, am not on board with that vaccine unless there's some huge data change and we ignore all the other data. I just can't rationally support that as a choice if it does get approved here. They broke all the promises they made about not combining different studies to get statistical significance. It has poor activity. It's the only vaccine that may have poor activity against the South African variant. So again, that's just the AstraZeneca update. The Johnson & Johnson update, hopefully it will be approved soon if the data is as good as the initial was. And then an update on the, hey Kim, the dog's snoring a little bit, it's a little loud. So the update on the Pfizer, a paper came out that showed a 94% decrease in infection, or basically a 94% immunity rate after another 3 or 4 months of exposure. So again, showing immunity. Again, showing immunity, and that's what's important. Another interesting thing is a paper came out, I think out of Oxford University in London, looking at bedenazide, which is what that Texas doctor popularized right at the beginning, showing, oh my goodness, this is a big surprise in this study. It showed a 90% reduction in hospitalization if you used it as an outpatient. I am continued to be amazed that we're finally here, we're a year in, and the stuff that was totally obvious to perhaps a smaller group of physicians in the country, like myself and this guy in Texas and a few other things, that steroids were going to work, Plaquenil was going to work, and Plaquenil works outpatient early, ivermectin works, bedenazide works, and other steroids, Medrol Dospex work. And I think that data is going to mature, it's going to continue to be proven, and if people don't remember that and don't hold the FDA and the CDC, and notably Francis Collins, who was the head of the NIH, and Anthony Fauci accountable for all the lies and the blocking of anything. And the only thing they approved in the first 6 months was remdesivir, essentially excluding the dexamethasone, but a new drug that doesn't even work. And everyone knows it doesn't work, and they've spent billions and billions of dollars and most likely have killed innumerable patients with it because it has all kinds of toxicities. But God forbid anyone was honest at the FDA. But enough of the negativity. Let's talk about the positive. we're killing it with the vaccine right now, not literally, figuratively. We're up to, I think, 1.3 million doses a day at the present rate. We will hit the 100 million to 120 million mark at 100 days into the Biden administration. And with that, we are going to be really close to herd immunity with between prior infections that we have documented, other infections that we don't have documented, which is probably 3 to 5 to 1. We also have people who are partially immune from the measles, mumps, and rubella, and from prior coronaviruses. So I'm still calling it somewhere around August 15th in Oklahoma, or not August 15th, April 15th. We're going to be close to herd immunity. It may be May, but I think it could be between April 1st and April 15th. We're really going to see our numbers come down pretty dramatically, even more than they have. And all the numbers nationally are down by a third. I think we'll continue to see that. I'm not worried about the variants at this point, and I think we can be optimistic. The problem we're going to run into is people adjusting to their new reality, which is the old reality that we can be doing stuff. We don't need to wear masks. And remember, I talked about masks and how they actually work. It looks like in a great study, the whole thing a mask does, it does not impede the virus from coming in. The predominant mechanism is it makes the humidity between your nose and your chin super high. It hits 100% humidity, and that's what kills the virus. So for those of you who thought masks were stupid and there was no way they could block the viruses, you're probably right. But what happened was it made this area with massive humidity present, and that killed the virus and stopped the transmission. So it was a secondary event, but still from the mask. But again, it takes science to figure that out, which also illustrates why wearing 2 masks is stupid, because it doesn't help. And that data is, again, just a report from the worst organization around, but I won't say who that is, so I don't get this pulled. So what questions do you have, Kim? I'm very optimistic about COVID. I think we're going to be out of this in a few months, and unless the governmental entities kind of mess with us, we can get back to normal, but you'll have to wait and watch, like I will.
Okay. What is the name of the antigen test from LabCorp?
So it's very specific. It's SARS-2 COVID quantitative antibody levels. SARS-2 COVID quantitative antibody levels. It will give you a number.
Okay. Why do you need to be vaccinated if you've already had COVID? Or minimally, why would they not recommend only 1 instead of 2?
So the question is, why would you get vaccinated if you had COVID? Why would you get vaccinated twice with COVID? I'll answer the second one first in some respects. The reason the person asked that question is we know from papers that 1 vaccine in people with prior exposure gives higher antibody levels than people who hadn't been exposed. You get 2 vaccines with the Pfizer. That's clearly established in a paper. So that's a great question. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I mean, I'm still encouraging people to consider getting the second vaccine, because you're going to have 2 of the Pfizer or the Moderna to travel. There's going to be a travel passport. They're going to ratchet down on our society. I'm not being political. It's how it is. This is the excuse governments need to control. So that's what's going to happen. Sorry, I'm against it, but hey, that's how it is. So you get the reason to get the first one, I think, is a little more reasonable on the off chance you didn't have that great of an immune response, which is probably about 5% of people. So if you get if you get 1 vaccine and you've had it once, you're with the Pfizer or the Moderna, your antibodies levels go higher essentially than someone who gets 2 vaccines who hasn't gotten COVID. But again, I think part of the whole thing is, do we really need 2 vaccines? And I think that if you look at the data, if you're under 55, it's no. But again, I can't explain the recommendations because they're not, they threw out science at the CDC and the NIH a long time ago with this. They threw it out. They're not using it. They don't care about the research. And so there is a movement, though, to change the vaccine schedule to just get everyone vaccinated once as quickly as we can and not do 2, because they understand it's going to give us massive more immunity than wasting the second vaccine on the vast majority of people, which is probably somewhere, if you're under 55, 95 to 99% of the time, and if you're over 55, 85% of the time. But I'm ballparking a little bit on that number. So again, that's just the science, and I can't explain the recommendations. I can't explain remdesivir when it doesn't work, and every study except one that they called off early because it was showing it didn't work, they passed that. All the data they've ignored on everything else, I don't know.
Have you seen where France is now recommending one vaccine, one shot, if you've been previously infected?
I had not seen it, but it makes sense because that's the data. It's the science, but we don't do science in the United States anymore. We do whatever Fauci and Collins say. I mean, it's stupid. But I mean, what do you do? I've posted the pictures January 17th of the pictures of the graphs. It's very clear. If you've already had it, you need one vaccine. If you haven't had it and you're under 55, you only need one vaccine. And essentially, if you're over 55, the vast majority of those people, minimally 85%, and I would argue 95%, looking at the paper, looking at their actual New England Journal of Medicine paper on the phase 2 trial, clearly one vaccine's enough. But, that's my opinion from reading the papers. It's self-evident. Look at the graphs. They're colored. They're easy.
So I'm going to ask you this question, which has been asked.
But that doesn't mean you don't get two, because you're going to want to travel, and that's the thing. There's going to be travel restrictions and other restrictions.
Yeah. So this has been asked before, and then I'm going to tell you somebody else's comment or answer to it and see what you think about theirs, because that's actually really interesting. So the question is, if you've had both vaccines, and this person happened to mention they were 68, is it okay to be with others that have also had both vaccines?
Yes. You're immune 95+% of the time. Yes.
Okay. So this other person's answer was that the mRNA is not a vaccine. There's no antigen. They're gene therapy designed to suppress symptoms, not to prevent transmission or infection.
That answer is completely incorrect. Let me explain messenger RNA for everyone, since I understand messenger RNA. Not like completely, but well enough, because we utilize something that's scientifically known as exosomes in our practice all the time. The FDA just came up with a new name, which I can't even say, but because I don't want to, it's too complicated. But basically, exosomes are little bubbles that are lipid bubbles cells secrete for intercellular communication. Stem cells secrete them, and they contain messenger RNA and healing proteins and mediators. So what happens if you're a cell? Okay, cell. There's a nucleus in the middle. So in our case, there's a pug head. That's the nucleus in the middle. Okay, that's a little pug face. So, because we're very puggy, so we have pug statuettes. It's very embarrassing. But anyway, so the pug face will secrete, it has DNA in it that converts in DNA, sends out messages through messenger RNA, which leaves and goes to the endoplasmic reticulum, which is this like squiggly thing in the middle part of the cell. And the messenger RNA is interpreted by the endoplasmic reticulum, and it makes proteins, which then get also put into exosomes and sent out. So what the vaccine, or mediators and things. So what the vaccine is it's a section of the RNA from the messenger, or it's a section of the messenger RNA from COVID-19. And it's the section of COVID-19 that codes for the spike protein. It's called the S1, and it's notable because it includes the S1 receptor binding domain, which is what attaches to the ACE2 receptor in your lungs or alveolar cells. So it's really, really important because that's where you get infected. It's not binding to macrophages or white blood cells. It's what kills you is the lung stuff, essentially. So if you take that section of messenger RNA, reproduce it, and that's the only part of the viral genomic piece or genes, you then put it in a lipid bubble, which is an exosome essentially, and you inject it in the arm. Those exosomes are going to go into cells, dissolve and excrete the messenger RNA section of the viral genomic sequence that's present. It's going to go to your endoplasmic reticulum in the cells. They're going to process it and make a protein. And know what protein they're going to make? The spike protein tip from COVID-19, or the S1 regional binding domain of that sequence. And then that's going to pop out on the cell and be there. And know what's going to happen then? Because there's going to be a bunch of them on the cells. The messenger RNA will dissolve. You'll have those. And then your body's going to go, oh gosh, what is that annoying little protein doing there? Because that spike protein isn't me. And your body recognizes that through some miracle of science and the Lord, or what. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can look at it. And it starts to have first an innate immune response, which makes you feel a little icky sometimes when you get the vaccine. But then two, your cell-mediated immunity, or directed adaptive immunity, responds to that with both your T helper cells and your B lymphocytes. And you make antibodies to those proteins, the spike protein, and then you train natural killer cells too, but we'll leave that alone. So you just make the antibodies, just think to the spike protein. So that's how it works. No, you're getting an immune response. Anyone who doesn't understand that, you just need to read. It's hard sometimes if you're not sciencey, but start with basic stuff about genes and that their DNA, and it turns into RNA, and then RNA goes and turns into proteins. And that's kind of the whole thing. So no, you're getting an antigen or a protein on your cells that are making you react to it. So then you have antibodies to the S1 RBD section of the spike protein, which then inactivate COVID if it enters your body quickly. And then within 3 hours, your T cells are also attacking it, basically. So that is an immune reaction. There, did I answer that?
I think so.
It's a little complicated. But, ultimately, just think the pug face is slobbering, and that slobber gets on the carpet, which is, we'll say, is the cytoplasm, and then along comes some cleaning agent, which is your endoplasmic reticulum, that turns it into protein. I don't know, it doesn't follow. And that protein floats because it's a cell membrane, it's a membrane protein. So it's going to come and populate the outside of the cell, or if I always use pumpkin pie for my examples of cells, it populates on the crust on the outside, so your immune system recognizes it. No, it causes immunity. Sorry. I don't know. I don't know why people are complicating this so much. And the other thing is the microchips are awesome. I mean, I just want, anyone who's worried about the microchips, they're awesome. They tell me I'm 5'8" all the time now. It's great. But anyway, anything else, Kim? No, that's it. So listen to your microchips, get the vaccine, and know this is all going to come to an end pretty soon. Good night.